these people are connected to these people, and it's all about the mineral water. Hello, friends and soon-to-be friends. Welcome to my venture into BookTube as I try to solve an Agatha Christie novel. This is my first Agatha Christie. I've never read any Agatha Christie, and I thought, what better start than to do her most famous, like the most famous murder mystery ever, Murder on the Orient Express. I know it's Hercule Poirot mystery and that it's on a train, but that is literally all I know about it. Until today. I started reading it, checked it out from my library on an ebook, and I've read the first 4 chapters. So I'm gonna use this cool board behind me. We're gonna put up a bunch of sticky notes and have fun as we go. So I'm gonna try to tell you kind of what's going on. So he leaves Syria on a train to Istanbul, and there are only 2 other passengers on that train. They are Mary Debenham, who's English. She's 28 years old. She's tall, slim, and dark, and believes she's a governess. She's intensely worried about making this connection to the next train, which is the Orient Express. And then Colonel Arbuthnot is English. He's between 40 and 50 years old, so like twice her age, and he's lean and dark. So I'm gonna put these up here. So that is a connection between them. He was overheard saying to Mary Debenham that he wishes to heaven she was out of all this. And then he sees Poirot and sort of plays it off as having to do with her being a governess, like he doesn't want her to have to be a governess. But I think there's something else going on. And then later, Poirot overheard Debenham saying, "Not now, when it's all over, when all of this is behind us, then." So I think they're up to something, but my suspicion is it's not related to the murder. So yeah. That is a clue. I guess that I'll just put the clue over here by her. So then Poirot gets off of that train and he thinks he's never going to see them again. And he goes to his hotel, and that's when he finds out that he needs to hurry back to London. So he gets passage on the Orient Express, but he has time to go to dinner. And when he's there, he just accidentally, unexpectedly meets an old friend of his, Monsieur Bouc. Sorry about the pronunciations. I don't speak French. Monsieur Bouc. I don't think he's gonna, I'm not worried about him, so I'm gonna put him over here because he's been friends with Poirot for a very long time, and he's the director of the train company. And then while they're eating, he sees these 2 interesting characters who he later learns are both American. One is Mr. Ratchet, and he's between 60 and 70 years old, and he looks like a kindly philanthropist, but he has small, deep-set, crafty eyes. The other one is McQueen, who's like 30 years old, and he seems agreeable. It seems like McQueen works for Mr. Ratchet. I have so many notes, folks. Okay, so when Monsieur Bouc and Poirot go to the train, the conductor is very, very respectful because of how Monsieur Bouc is a big wig in the company. But he says there's no room, there's 0 room. We can't fit him in at all. There's even a special room that's usually left open, and they're like, no, there's no room. And then the conductor says, well, there's 4 minutes until the train leaves, and there's this one English guy who hasn't showed up, and his name is A.M. Harris. All we know about him is that he's a no-show, but he was mentioned, so. Oh, I even have a card for the conductor. I wrote that he's probably innocent, but you never know. Then at lunch, he sees everybody, and this is when we really start to see all the characters. So obviously, these 4 characters are there. It actually turns out that McQueen, the younger American, he is also in berth 7 with Poirot. So the people that we meet then are 3 travelers that are traveling alone, a big swarthy Italian, an American in a loud suit who's possibly a commercial traveler, and an Englishman who's neat, and he looks like a well-trained servant. Okay. Then there's a Russian princess who is rich, old, and ugly. and her name is Princess Dragomirov. The one thing that I kind of found like stood out about him listening in on what she was doing is that she asks to have orange juice and mineral water delivered to her compartment, and I find this suspicious because a few pages later someone else mentions mineral water, and so now I'm on this mineral water conspiracy theory. So I'm just gonna put that up there. I don't know why, but it's something going on in my head. Okay, so Princess Dragomirov and is asking for mineral water. Mary Debenham is sitting next to someone that she's tall, has a sheep-like face, she's Swedish, middle-aged, and a teaching missionary. So she goes over here, and I'm calling her the Swedish sheep. Okay. So the other person turns out to be Mrs. Hubbard. She's elderly, she's an American, and she has a hunch that Ratchet, this older American guy, is a murderer or something. She also says, and I found this suspicious, she's the other mineral water one, seems they have to have a 10% tip, and then there's that bottle of mineral water. Bum, bum, bum. She's here. Okay, so then there are 3 more people. One of them is a German or Scandinavian lady. She's middle-aged. Poirot says she's probably a German lady's maid. And then there's a couple. Monsieur Luc says that he believes they're from the Hungarian embassy. The man is 30 years old, around 30 years old. He's a big man. He's well-made. He's handsome and has a big mustache. In fact, Poirot goes on about how cute he is for quite some time. I'm suspicious of that. And then he says the girl she's a mere girl, about 20 years old. So they're all eating lunch, and he sees all these people. Then everybody leaves. They said the car was empty, except for Poirot and Mr. Ratchet and McQueen. When McQueen leaves, instead of following him, Ratchet goes to talk to Poirot, and he wants to hire him to keep him safe. He says there's been threats on his life, and that an enemy is trying to kill him. Poirot refuses to help him because, quote, I don't like your face. At 8:45, they're at a train stop, and Poirot is moved to Monsieur Bouc's compartment. In Monsieur Bouc's new train car, he says the only person in there with him is a Greek doctor. I'm not making a sticky for the Greek doctor because I don't think he's in the same compartments, but that may come back to bite me later. It's 8:45 p.m. and Poirot gets moved to a new compartment. So at 9:15, which is our next time that we have, the train leaves the station right on time. And then right after that, Poirot is walking to his cabin and he sees Colonel Arbuthnot talking to McQueen. Why are they talking to each other? And then he sees Mrs. Hubbard talking to the Swedish sheep outside Mrs. Hubbard's compartment. After Hubbard and the Swedish sheep are talking, Mrs. Hubbard says she has plenty of aspirin in her compartment. So I'm back on my mineral water conspiracy theory, and I feel like somehow the aspirin and the mineral water, maybe that's how he dies or something. Can you die of aspirin and mineral water? I don't know. Okay. Then Mrs. Hubbard tells Poirot that she's suspicious of Ratchet, and she says that one of the reasons, other than just like intuition, is that someone was trying the handle between their compartments, like there's a connecting door, and the first night someone was like trying to get into her room. So then the last part of these chapters, Poirot awakes at 1:37 a.m. due to a loud groan, almost a cry, somewhere close at hand. And at the same moment, a bell sounded. It's like the attendant bell. And so the conductor comes and knocks on Mr. Ratchet's door twice. But when he's knocking a second time, another bell and light go off down the way. And at the same time, somebody replies from Ratchet's room in French saying that the first bell was a mistake. And so the conductor runs off to go check on the other bell, and Poirot also notices that the train isn't moving. So the next chapter is entitled The Crime. So I think things are really going to heat up. I think we've got a good start. I'm going to put the connections on, like I'm going to use some string and yarn and stuff to like connect some of the connections so we can kind of see it. Hey y'all, I'm back. I've read 4 more chapters. So we're going to jump right in. A lot happens because we're learning about the crime. We get to see the crime scene and the body and all that. So we find out that the reason the train is not moving then is that at 12:30, they hit a snowdrift. No one's been able to leave the train since then. So for sure the murderer is on the train. Right after that, after the 12:37 a.m. stuff, Poirot hears someone moving in Ratchet's cabin. He says he hears Ratchet moving. Then Poirot mentions that he forgot to order his mineral water. Bringing it back around to the mineral water conspiracy theory. Around 1:15, he's going to order some water to drink, but he hears that somebody else calls the attendant first, and he can hear that it's Miss Hubbard over here who has a lot of stuff going on. But she tells the conductor that she insists that there's a man in her cabin. But the conductor says the cabin is so small and he can see that there is not. After Poirot has talked to the conductor and learned this stuff about Mrs. Hubbard, thinking that someone was in her room, then he is just about to fall asleep and he is woken by a thud against his door as though something heavy had fallen. But when he goes to look, he saw to the right, some way down the corridor, a woman wrapped in a scarlet kimono going away from him. And then to the left, the conductor was sitting there doing some paperwork. Who is the woman in the kimono? Is it even a woman, right? What if it's a man? Part of me kind of thinks it's a man. Also interesting because I cannot think of what would make that thud. Okay, so then after the thud, Poirot goes back to sleep and he wakes up, and in the morning he goes to eat breakfast in the restaurant car. At 11:30, Monsieur Bouc calls Poirot into a special compartment and he meets Dr. Constantine, who is the Greek doctor. Poirot finds out that Mr. Ratchet has been stabbed, and he finds out that there's no police on board, which is definitely a clue because the train is stopped in Yugoslavia and it's like the only country where the local police aren't on board the train. So I'm sure that that was intentional. The conductor used his key to get them in, but the lock on the inside was fastened, like the door chain was also fastened. So it's locked from the inside and all of that. Monsieur Bouc, upon hearing it, suggests that the large, common-looking American could be the killer. But the conductor says that he would have seen the American that's traveling alone leave from number 16 because apparently that's like near the conductor's area. It's also suspicious to me, why is the American in number 16? Because they apparently keep that one reserved, but they had someone in it already. And now the conductor is vouching for that person. So is he someone important, like maybe a detective or someone undercover? So then they have Ratchet's secretary, Hector McQueen, come and they talk to him. He doesn't know anything about Ratchet, his life in America or anything, and he thinks that he's maybe been traveling under a false name. And 14 days ago, Ratchet received his first threatening letter. It's interesting that McQueen last saw Ratchet at 10 p.m. because at 9:15 p.m., Poirot saw McQueen and Arbuthnot talking. Colonel Arbuthnot, this guy. So, what were they up to? So then Poirot goes to check out the crime scene and the body. So we know that the window to Ratchet's compartment was wide open, even though it's super cold outside. And they all seem to believe that this is some kind of trick to make us think that the killer jumped out of the train. But because they can see the snow, doesn't have any tracks, then they are sure that that didn't happen. So Dr. Constantine thinks that the death occurred around 1 a.m., that Ratchet was drugged and stabbed 12 times. 2 of the blows used extreme force, and he believes they were delivered by a man. The rest of them were as if they shut their eyes and struck blindly again and again, and these were feeble. The blows are struck by both left-handed and right-handed people, or maybe the same person but with left and right hands, I suppose. Some were delivered after the man had been dead for a while. Found at the scene of the crime is a small square hanky. It's like a little dainty hanky, and a pipe cleaner, and a dented gold watch. They think was dented during the attack. It's like in his pocket, and it stopped at 1:15. And the doctor is sure that these are great clues, but Poirot is like, it kind of seems like they're setting a scene for us, or this was staged. There was also on the lid of the washing bin an empty glass, a bottle of mineral water. I'm just super excited because I really think my mineral water conspiracy theory is working out. An ashtray with a cigarette butt, 2 different matches, and a burned note. The paper says, maybe remember little Daisy Armstrong. It turns out that this is a case that Poirot is familiar with that happened in America a while back. He believes that the victim, Mr. Ratchet, that his real name is Cassetti, and that he was like this gang boss that murdered a 3-year-old named Daisy Armstrong. And she had really famous grandparents. They found the dead child, the mother died, and she had been pregnant, and so the baby died too. And then the dad shot himself because he was heartbroken, I guess. And then the French or Swiss nursemaid killed herself. So then, I said I think maybe the window was open to keep the body cold for some reason, like to throw off the time or something. Then I also thought they're trying to figure out how could somebody leave the car after they killed him. But if Mrs. Hubbard, who claimed someone was trying to get into their car and then later insists that a man was in her compartment, if that's all just lies and she's actually one of the attackers, then the sounds at 12:37 could be the first murderer cleaning the knife and then leaving, and then Hubbard comes in later through the connected door, but then she could lock the room from the inside, do whatever she needed to do to set the scene, or do her part of the stabbing or whatever, and then go back out her door and lock the connecting door, right? So that's where I am, headed into part 2. Stay tuned. I will be back soon with the next few chapters, and we'll have some evidence collected. I have finished the second part of the book out of the 3 parts. So today I'm going to present to you the evidence. The first person they talk to is the conductor. One of the most important thing that he gives us, I think, is the map of the train car. So now we know where all their rooms are. So then they talk to McQueen, and they find out that his father was the DA in the Armstrong case. So now doesn't that seem suspicious? That he also happens to be working for the perpetrator of the Armstrong case. He did say that he saw a conductor pass, so that he was in this room with Colonel Arbuthnot and saw a conductor pass from the dining car going this way, and then later he saw a person in a scarlet kimono going this way. Then they talk to Masterman, who's Ratchet's valet. He tells us that his roommate, Foscarelli, the Italian guy, he's Italian, but he's from Chicago, so he's American. And he claims that Foscarelli didn't leave the apartment all night. Masterman was up with a toothache and would have noticed. Then we have Mrs. Hubbard. So this is our victim's compartment, and this is Poirot's compartment. Mrs. Hubbard is on the other side, and she has that connecting door that she's been worried about. The hanky that was found in his cabin had an H on it, so they asked her about it, and she said it's not hers. She has these giant utilitarian hankies. And then the button is a clue that she says she found it on the magazine that was beside her bed, and it's a conductor's button, so she's sure the conductor did it. But it turns out that the conductor still has all his buttons. All the conductors do. Olsen comes back later at 10:30 or 10:45 and came back to ask for aspirin. And while she was there, Miss Hubbard was already in bed, so she told her where to find the aspirin and then asked her to please check that the connected door was bolted, and Ms. Olsen said it was. She could have unlocked it at that time if she's in on it. And so she's the next person they talk to, and the thing that I noticed first was that she's a trained nurse. She said that she, at 10:30ish, she went to go get aspirin from Mrs. Hubbard, but she accidentally opened the wrong door first and saw Ratchet reading, obviously alive, and that he laughed at her and made some rude comments. And then she says that she alibis Mary Debenham, who's her cabin mate, because she's just a super light sleeper and she would have heard if the person in the bunk above her got up. Then they talked to Princess Dragomirov. She says that the mom in the Armstrong case was her goddaughter, and she was really close friends with Daisy Armstrong's grandma, Linda Arden, who was the greatest tragic actress. I almost feel like Dragomirov could be Linda Arden. So Sonia Armstrong was Linda Arden's daughter, and then she had a second daughter who was much younger. I kind of feel like, you know, Mary Debenham or the Hungarian Countess are really the only two that would probably be the right age to be that younger daughter. So then they talked the Count and the Countess. They barely say anything. They say they went into Count Andrenyi's cabin and played piquet until 11 when the Countess went to her bed and the Count went to his bed. They both slept soundly till morning. They've only been married for a year, and there's like quite a big deal made of that there's a spot of grease that's been dropped onto the Countess's passport. So like, I wonder if the passports are faked and that was like trying to cover a mistake. So then they talked to Colonel Arbuthnot. He's the only one who admits to smoking a pipe. And then they find later when they search his luggage that his pipe cleaner is the exact same type as they found in the room. So then they talked to Mr. Hardman, which is the American traveling salesman, but he actually is a detective at McNeil's in New York. Ratchet hired him to keep him safe, and Ratchet described the assailant to Hardman as small, dark, and with a womanish voice. There were 3 people described in the first part as being small and dark, and it's Mary Debenham, Countess Andrenyi, and then also small and dark is Dr. Constantine, the Greek doctor. So Antonio Foscarelli is the Italian guy. Say the only thing that he mentioned, Masterman mentioned he had a toothache. That's the valet and their roommates. And Masterman alibied Foscarelli for the whole night. And Foscarelli says he don't think Masterman left because every time that he did wake up in the night, he could hear him groaning, like in pain. So then he talks to Debenham. Debenham says that her cabin mate, Olsen, the Swedish sheep lady, she, when she went to get the aspirin, that she was only gone for 5 minutes. And then after that, Debenham alibis her for the rest of the night. The last person they talked to is Ms. Schmidt, the lady's maid for Dragomirov. She pretty much says the same exact stuff as Dragomirov. She says she was there for half an hour. But she does say that when she left Dragomirov to go back to her cabin, she went to her cabin, got a rug, which I assume she means like a blanket, brought it back to Dragomirov, and then went back to her room. So she went to get the rug, and when she was coming back with it, that she ran into, like literally ran into, a conductor, but it wasn't the conductor of any of the trains that she'd seen. This was a small, dark person with a womanly voice. Very interestingly that it was the exact same description. And she says she saw them coming out of a compartment 2 or 3 down from Dragomirov's, which would be at either Countess Andrenyi or Hubbard's. This was right when Hubbard was saying that somebody had been in her room. So either someone came out of Ratchet's room into Hubbard's room and exited somehow without being noticed by anybody except Schmidt, or came out of Countess Andrenyi's room, or Schmidt is completely lying, right? Which would make sense if like Dragomirov was actually Linda Arden and Schmidt was like, I don't know, related to the nursemaid that died or something, then that could be all made up, right? That somehow they got if Olsen's in on it, then they could get the button onto the magazine in Hubbard's room, and then I don't know, see, there would have to be so many people in on it to, but I mean, it's all staged, so I feel like everybody's in on it. So then Miss Hubbard comes screaming in that she found the bloody knife, the murder weapon, in the bag that she had that was hanging on the connecting doors. So at first I thought the window's open because he was actually killed much earlier and they're trying to throw it off with the cold weather. And then I thought, oh, Olsen didn't really see him alive, and that's just to throw off the timeline or like set the timeline the way they want it. she said she saw him alive, but didn't really, and then went in and planted the bloody knife and the button, and unlocked the thing and did all of that. But I don't know, because there's so much stuff that happens in his room, it's the loud groan and the accidental bell ring that make me feel like maybe he did die then, at 12:37. So that wouldn't be the case at 10:30. But I really like the idea of there being somebody who says, oh no, I saw him alive. And then it turns out they weren't alive at that time. I mean, if everybody's in on it, he could have been dead after dinner. So Poirot suspects that the kimono will be found in a man's baggage and the uniform found in Schmidt's, especially if she's innocent, because she's the one that saw the conductor. And so as the conductor was running past her, they would know that she wasn't going to be in her room, and they could hide that in her luggage and then run off. So they do find it there, as he suspects. And the really interesting thing is, after they check everyone's luggage, he goes back to his own compartment and he finds the kimono in his own luggage. Poirot does. The cheek. I mean, whoever did that, very nice. Then another weird thing with the Countess, right? She had the grease spot or whatever on her passport, and he says he's making trivial conversation and tells her, here's a label all wet on your suitcase, a blue Morocco case with initials on it and a coronet. And I'm wondering if the initials aren't going to have to do with an H. They don't tell us what the initials are, but I think she's not who she says she is, and that maybe that's her hanky. But I feel like that's important. So that's what I've got so far. I have a lot of theories, and none of them pan out the whole way. I do think that the reason someone was speaking French, Ratchet, the reason he hired his secretary is because Ratchet didn't speak a lot of languages. That's what McQueen said way early on. And so now he's speaking good French. So I think whatever the groan was about caused, if Ratchet was dying then and he somehow managed to ring for the conductor, then whoever was in there would have to say, oh no, don't open the door, I don't need anything, it was an accident. But maybe they would give it away if they spoke with an American accent, they couldn't, so they spoke in French or something. I don't know who was doing the washing up after that in the room, and I don't know if they were just doing it so it seems like Ratchet's alive. Maybe all of this, he's been dead a long time, and it's just to make it seem like he was alive at this time, so that people would have alibis. And then there's a thump at 1:17 a.m., and then he looks out and sees the person in the scarlet kimono. And the conductor says that he could see the person in the scarlet kimono at that time, and no one else was in the hallway, and that nothing would have made a thump at his door. So it could have come from Ratchet's room or Debenham and Olsen's room. I'm going to read the next part up until the point where he says, and now I'm going to tell you how it was done. And then I'll tell you my theory, and we'll see what happened. Wish me luck. Okay, we are back. I read through the Poirot sits and thinks part up until the point where he says, and now if you can bring everybody into the car, I'm going to tell you what happened. And he actually says he has two suppositions of what he thinks happened. So I'm going to follow suit. I have two things. I'm sure his are right and mine are way off, but let me catch you up on what he said so far. So he recalls that McQueen said that Ratchet knew no languages but good American, and so it was someone else speaking French in his room at 12:37. So someone else spoke French. So I had already said that, right? I said that at 12:37, I thought somebody else was speaking French in there. They don't know why the watch was set to 1:15. He decides the intruder had to have entered the room when the conductors were outside at Vinkovci, because it's the only time, except for 15 minutes after he was probably already dead, that the conductor wasn't watching the hallway. So he says unless the conductor's in on it, then that has to be when the person got into the room. He poses 10 questions. Whose handkerchief was at the crime scene? And he later reveals that it was Dragomirov's hanky, and the letter H was actually the Cyrillic. It looks like an N. It looks like an H, but it's the Cyrillic N for Natalia. But we don't know if it was planted or dropped. And then he doesn't say how the pipe cleaner got there, and he later tells Arbuthnot that it's not that important because he can think of 11 ways that it would have gotten there. No idea who wore the scarlet kimono. I think that it's Masterman. Who is the fake conductor? They give us 4 possibilities. It could be Masterman, Debenham, Dragomirov, or Countess Andrenyi, and that's based on the description as small, dark, and with a womanish voice. They say that everybody else, their body type isn't the right one for it. So I hadn't included Dragomirov when I made my list. So that's a thought. Although she's like old and frail, so I don't know. And then he says, why do the watch hands point to 1:15? And then was at the time of the murder, or was it earlier or later? And then was Ratchet stabbed by more than one person? Or if not, how do we explain the wounds? So he also told us that when he actually had everyone write something, except Dragomirov refused. She declined to write. But everyone wrote right-handed, so we don't know what the left-handedness thing is. But he also is really interested in that Dragomirov, he kind of tries to trick her into showing whether she's left-handed or right-handed, but she says, she kind of looks at both her arms and says, I have no strength in these. I do not know whether to be sorry or glad. So I don't know if that means that she wanted to be part of killing him but couldn't because of her arms, or I kind of wonder, Schmidt is so devoted to her and she's so frail, and I thought, could they both have killed him? Like Schmidt held her arm and helped her kill him, and so the time difference was because at some point Dragomirov needed to rest, and that's the difference between at first it was frenzied and then she was getting tireder and couldn't do that much, so that's the frail ones. And they switched hands for that reason too, maybe, I don't know. But I don't know, they couldn't have killed him at 12:37 because when the Poirot hears the groan and all that next door, because when the conductor is talking to the person who replies in French from that room, Dragomirov calls him down to her room to go get her maid. And so obviously they couldn't have been in the room at the time. I guess the maid could have been, and then quickly left down to her room while the conductor was walking down to Dragomirov's room, but I feel like that wouldn't work. But it's a thought that I've had. I'll tell you, I've had a lot of thoughts and not a lot of clarity. So then Poirot says that it's significant that the train car is packed when other train cars are empty, and that it's usually empty this time of year. So it's not a coincidence that all of these people are here and that this car is packed. But he also says it's significant that A.M. Harris didn't show up. So I want to know, who is that and how is it significant? I said that earlier, I made an A.M. Harris thing. Who is that? Other significant points he said that that were important are the position of Mrs. Hubbard's sponge bag, which was on the connecting door handle, the name of Mrs. Armstrong's mother, the detective methods of Hardman, the suggestion from McQueen that Ratchet himself burned the note that said something about the Armstrong family, Dragomirov's Christian name, and a grease spot on a Hungarian passport. So he then goes on to explain that Mrs. Armstrong's mother's name, Linda Arden, is taken from Shakespeare, and that in fact the grease spot on the passport was hiding that the Countess's real name was Helena, which is also from Shakespeare. So Helena was actually the younger daughter of Mrs. Armstrong's mother, it's Mrs. Armstrong's little sister. And then Dragomirov's name is Natalia, and they figure out the hanky. So those are 3 of the things. But then he didn't discuss the other 3, the position of Mrs. Hubbard's sponge bag, the detective methods of Hardman, and the suggestion from McQueen that Ratchet burned the note himself. So I think Ratchet didn't burn the note himself, and somebody burned it because they didn't want anything to do with Daisy Armstrong to come up, because obviously that would put these people that are connected to the case at a disadvantage, right? They would be under suspicion. The position of Mrs. Hubbard's sponge bag. So if that's not a normal place to keep a sponge bag, then she must have something to do with it because she's the person who put it there. I don't know. And then the detective methods of Hardman. He doesn't talk about that at all. Hardman comes in there to talk at one point, and they do have like a kind of a weird exchange, but I didn't get any clues from it, so I don't know. These are significant though. So Poirot says that 12 of 12 passengers, 9 have been connected to the Armstrong case. Masterman, it turns out he was Colonel Armstrong's valet. Foscarelli was the chauffeur. McQueen, we know, was the DA's son. I believe Schmidt is one of the ones we don't know, although she's Dragomirov's lady's maid, and so obviously has a connection through that. But they suggest kind of jokingly that maybe she's the cook. And Poirot did say, like, I know you're a good cook, as kind of like a compliment to make her feel good, like trust him or whatever, so that might be true. Olsen was actually the nurse, like the nurse maid was the one that killed herself, and this, you know, is who she would have worked for. Debenham is the governess that was taking care of the young Miss Armstrong, which would have been the Countess. Then there's Poirot and Ratchet. Hubbard is one of the ones that doesn't have a connection that we know about, but again, they jokingly say maybe she was the housekeeper. Countess Andrigny is the second daughter. Count Andrigny is her husband, which is how he would be connected. Dragomirov was Linda Arden's best friend and the godmother of Mrs. Armstrong. And then Arbuthnot, I don't think they've actually said how he's connected, but I think that he must have been in the service with Colonel or Mr. Whatever, the Armstrong guy, the dad. And then Hardman he's not directly tied to it, but he could have been a detective on the case, maybe. I don't know. So I'm about to read the end and tell you what happened, but first I will give you my own supposition. I'm sure that I don't have it right, but I hope that at some point I touched on some of it, right? So you guys can see and hear that I've thought this through. So here are my 2 possible scenarios. So I have the Hubbard theory. Mrs. Hubbard had access to and from Ratchet's room whenever she wanted, so she could have killed him at any point. And then, I mean, especially any point after 10:30 when Olsen came in her room, right? And Olsen even said it was locked. Maybe it really was locked. So she could have gone in there and made as much noise as she wanted. She could have killed him whenever she wanted. She could have drugged him with water. I don't know. She could have gone in there and been like, oh, excuse me, wrong water or something, because I still think the mineral water is important. I am sticking to that conspiracy theory. I don't know if she speaks French. It's potential she could do it. I think she's a big enough lady. She probably could have like really gone in for, you know, done left and right and come back later. And so one theory is that she did it all, but I don't know how that fits in with the kimono or the conductor, because she could say the conductor was there. She could plant the button, and she could even potentially hide the conductor uniform, but she wouldn't look right if she ran down the hall in it. So she obviously wasn't the conductor. So that's a major hole. That's a major hole. But I mean, she could have murdered him and set the scene and everything. That's the Hubbard theory. And then the other theory I have is it's literally everyone except Mrs. Hubbard. I have considered it could be literally everyone, but I'm gonna go with this. It's literally everyone except Mrs. Hubbard. So like they purposefully gathered together on this train knowing he would be there. Like maybe Masterman and McQueen found out who he was. Maybe McQueen found out who he was or even tracked him down and then got in his employ, got Masterman in his employ, and they've been, you know, gathering all these people together for the purpose of revenge. Who knows for how long? I mean, for maybe the whole whatever year or whatever that he worked there. So then everyone gathers together on the train for this. I don't know who A.M. Harris is, and I do think that's probably important. But if everybody's in on it, Ratchet could have been killed at any time after dinner because McQueen could have done it when he was there at 10, or Masterman could have done it or drugged him before McQueen came there. When he gave him the sleeping draught, that could have been him drugging him, and then McQueen comes in and does the dirty work. I don't know. They left the window open probably to keep the body cool so that they wouldn't be able to tell time. And then, you know, Olsen's in on it, so she pretends like she saw him alive. Then she plants the knife in the button in Miss Hubbard's and like unlocks the connecting door. And then someone else gets in the room, maybe through the window at Vinkovsky, bangs around, scares Hubbard, runs off. I mean, the running off scared Hubbard, right? It almost seems a little more legit because like they all knew each other, so I feel like it's not outside the bounds of possibility to have been brought here together to each play a role. So I'm not sure how the red kimono fits in. Those are the closest I could come to formulating a possibility. Now I'm going to read the last chapter and then I will let you know what happened. Okay, I'm about to read, but I just wanted to say, I've actually had so much fun with this and spent hours and hours and hours thinking about it and figuring it out and making this board and all these things. I've been having such fun. So I've actually bought like map push pins and like little tiny things of yarn so that it will be like brighter and more fun if I get to do another one of these. So if you like this, be sure and thumbs up or comment so that I know I should make another one of these. Okay, on with the reading. I'm on like the second page and oh my gosh. He says, the evidence of Mr. Hardin. Okay, so after that time, it was impossible for anyone to leave the train. The evidence of Mr. Hardin, blah, 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 shows that no one could have passed his compartment without being seen. We are therefore forced to the conclusion that the murderer is to be found among the occupants of one particular coach, the Stamboul-Calais coach. That, I will say, was our theory. It's going to be the doctor, isn't it? Who are the other people that aren't in that coach? The chef de train, A.M. Harris, we don't know who that is, Monsieur Bouc and Dr. Constantine, and the old gentleman with the lame leg in the coach from Bucharest. He got on the train at Vinkovsky. Who hasn't been on the train the whole time? Oh, the doctor got mad at the first solution, which I think just points out that he did it. That crime was not committed, so. Oh, yeah. How would you know how the crime was committed, buddy? Okay. McQueen might have been in on it because of the note thing. Yeah, I said that when he said that the suggestion from McQueen that Ratjet himself burned the note kind of made it seem like McQueen burned the note. Okay. Oh, well, it wasn't everybody but Mrs. Hubbard, because if it's the everybody version, Mrs. Hubbard, her sponge bag placement thing, it was because in some of the rooms, the sponge bag would have covered the lock mechanism, but in her room, the odd numbered rooms, it doesn't, and she should have been able to see it. So, yeah, this is extraordinary. They cannot all be in it. And then, messieurs, I saw the light. They were all in it. For so many people connected with the Armstrong case to be traveling by the same train by coincidence was not only unlikely, it was impossible. Yeah. Each person played his or her allotted part. It was so arranged that if suspicion should fall on one person, The evidence of one or more of the others would clear the accused person and confuse the issue. There were 12 wounds and 12 people. They each took a turn. Yeah, the mythical woman in the red kimono was just a red herring. Even the conductor must be in on it. The dead nursery maid was French. Oh, that it was Pierre Michel's. It was the conductor's daughter. Mrs. Hubbard was Linda Arden. I thought maybe Drag Me Off was. Okay. So they tried to get all the carriages reserved, but they couldn't get Monsieur Bouc's, which is where Poirot ended up. And then A.M. Harris, that was supposed to be in with McQueen, was just made up. Oh, okay, it's kind of cute because then at the end they decide to tell the police a lie. And tell them the first version. That's cute. Okay. I mean, I wasn't terribly far off. I really thought that I was nowhere near it, but like I had some of it. I had the idea that maybe it was all of them, right? All right. Okay, I don't feel too bad about that. I'm pretty excited. Yeah, if you liked this as much as I did, please give me a thumbs up or a comment or something just to let me know, because I definitely would like to make more of these in the future. If you have suggestions for books, let me know. Yeah, this is different than what I usually do, but I loved it. So I hope you did too. And thanks for watching.